Glad you're here. We all keep everybody inhale.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, there we go. Everybody good?
We're cozy.
Good. Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here in Wausau. I want to begin today by thanking Wausau Mayor Rosenberg and everybody here at the Wausau Fire Department and Station 2 for hosting us today. I know this doesn't happen every day, and I'm guessing you're really glad about that. I also want to thank State Senator LaTanya Johnson, Representative Katrina Shanklin, Department of Revenue Secretary Barca for being here, as well as Senator Mary Filskowski and Representative Tony Kurtz. Other legislators, I know Representative Spiros is here, Snyder, Ortez Velez, and also Senator Tomchek. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Obviously, we also have Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, Milwaukee Mayor Chevy Johnson, and all the local leaders and emergency responsible professionals who are with us today as we make historic investments in local communities of every size statewide. So I want to also acknowledge that this historic day represents a culmination of relentless work over many, many years. So thank you for your partnership in that. I began working on this issue when I took office as governor, and that effort began for me with a simple truth that for far too long our local communities have been forced to do more with less. And we've seen the consequence of that inaction play out in communities across Wisconsin, especially in recent years. Shared revenue is one of the most significant sources of funding provided by the state to local governments. So with shared revenue being held stagnant for the last decade, local partners in every corner of the state have been forced to make impossible decisions about what essential services to fund, having to choose between paying for first responders, addressing PFAS, fixing the roads, and other critical priorities that affect health, safety, and well-being of Wisconsinites everywhere. To me, this issue has always been about doing the right thing for Wisconsin, because I believe, as I'm sure that the folks around here today believe and agree, that the state should be doing its part to support our local partners, and our local communities should have the resources they need to make sure that those basic and unique needs alike are done. I've always said, much of the hard work that happens in our state happens at the local level, whether it's expanding affordable housing, repairing streets, ensuring clean parks and water, providing essential services like EMS, police, and fire, or supporting local libraries and public health. And I've also believed that supporting our local communities is an area where we could find common ground and bipartisan support. Well, folks, I was right, and you can see behind me today that we were correct. 2 weeks ago, I reached agreement with Republican leaders on major provisions of a shared revenue compromise, key portions of which I'm signing into law today. That will mean not only historic increases in support for our local communities, but historic investments in our kids and our schools across Wisconsin. So let's start with shared revenue. This historic compromise includes at least a 20% increase in support to most municipalities statewide. So what's that mean for communities in central Wisconsin? Stevens Point will see more than a more than 25% increase in aid from the state. That means a total of more than $4 million to support local needs. City of Wausau will receive a nearly 30% increase, which means a total of over $5 million in aid from the state. And it also helps our towns and villages statewide too. Take Rib Mountain, for example. The town of Rib Mountain is going to see a more than 200% increase in aid from the state. That's huge. It's huge. And the same is true for so many of our smaller communities across the state. Our towns, our villages, our municipalities aren't the only ones. Our counties will receive additional support from the state. Here in Marathon County, state aid will total more than $5 million, an increase of nearly 35%. I've always said much of this hard work happens in the state, happens at the local level. These historic increases will go a long way for our first responders and emergency response personnel who've been sounding the alarm for years about needing more resources to ensure the neighbors that they serve get help when they need it. Whether it's providing essential services like EMS, police and fire, repairing the streets, expanding affordable housing, ensuring kids and families have clean parks and water, addressing issues like PFAS, as Mayor Rosenberg is doing right here in Wausau, or supporting local libraries and public health today means our local partners might finally be able to make ends meet. To leave our state with a legacy of prosperity, we must fulfill our obligation to fund our communities. The future of our state, our economy, and our workforce depend on that. And yes, that does include ensuring economic solvency, stability, and success for the city of Milwaukee and Milwaukee County. Now let's talk about education, because we are not only providing historic investments in our local communities. I also secured $1 billion in spendable revenue for K-12 schools and education, which means we're finally going to get our schools much needed resources that can be used for our kids in our classrooms across Wisconsin. We're going to provide a $325 per pupil increase in both years of the biennium on revenue limits, while ensuring we maintain our state's commitment to 2/3 funding, and also increasing the low revenue ceiling to $11,000 from $10,000. So what's that mean for a school district like Wausau? Wausau will see more than a $6.5 million more in overall revenue limit authority based on their membership. And not only that, but I've worked to continue our investments in school-based mental health with a $30 million investment over the next 2 years to get our kids the help they need to be successful both in and outside the classroom. And we're also setting aside $50 million aimed at helping improve literacy and reading outcomes for our kids statewide. So folks, here's the gist. This compromise is a big deal for our kids, our families, and our communities across our state. It's my job as governor to always work to do the right thing for the people and communities of the state, and this is the right thing for Wisconsin. So with that, it is my pleasure now to hand it over to Mayor Katie Rosenberg to say a few words. Katie, it's all yours. Thank you.
Don't you go anywhere. We need you there in a second. Governor, mayors, state legislators, fellow electeds, and local government employees and enthusiasts, thank you for joining us here in Wausau for this historic day. And it truly is historic. I went back in the Legislative Fiscal Bureau archives and found that the last time there was an increase in shared revenue, we saw a 1% increase, and I was still a teenager. For context, I will be turning 40 this year. And thanks. And from my own personal archives, in April 2021, I drove up to the Joint Finance Committee hearing that was held at the Rhinelander-Hodag Dome to make one request, shore up shared revenue. At the time, I was asking for a 2% increase, which would have been an additional $81,000. We didn't get that 2% increase in 2021, but sometimes transformation takes time. And honestly, what we're about to do here today was worth the wait. In butterflies, we call the process of transformation metamorphosis, where the butterfly pupas literally break down their body tissues into blobs of goo inside hanging chrysalises before reforming their cellular makeup into wings and legs. I honestly don't know what they call this transformation in the Wisconsin legislature. But I know it goes through several phases, in and out of the governor's office, into the partisan caucuses, through committees, and eventually to the Assembly and Senate, where an exhausted kaleidoscope of legislative butterflies emerge at 3 a.m., lugging reams of paper, awaiting its final stages to be festooned by the governor's endorsement. And that's why we're here today. All of you little red and blue butterflies did it, despite what I assume were some truly grueling stages of AB 245's metamorphosis. I know the politics on this one were tough. It would have been easy to let partisan hackery win. And since I'm kind of in this science metaphor right now, I'm going to quote my favorite paleontologist, evolutionary biologist, and science philosopher and historian, Stephen Jay Gould, who said, "The dogmatist within is always worse than the enemy without." And I suppose it's possible you all have bouts scheduled for the next year, but for now, it truly appears that you've pulled together and shown citizens from Superior to Appleton to Waukesha to Milwaukee to Marinette to Wausau that we can, in fact, come together in an historic bipartisan fashion to fund critical services like public safety. And that's also why we're here today at our beautiful Fire Station 2 here in Wausau. This building was an investment that past city councils made to these services. They wanted to ensure that our firefighters had the right training opportunities and equipment to serve our community and save lives. However, that investment wasn't enough to support the team doing all of this work. Before last year, the city of Wausau's firefighting line staff hadn't seen an increase in my entire lifetime. That's despite the fact that Wausau firefighter paramedics are responding to more calls than ever. We've averaged a 3 to 6% increase in call volume across each of the last 10 years. Last year, Wausau Fire responded to 6,700 calls. This year, we're on pace to respond to a record-breaking 7,000 calls, 90% of which are EMS. And in the last 2 decades, we've had zero growth in state funding assistance. But last year, we got a huge break, thanks to an aggressive move by our fire chief, Bob Bartek. Wausau was awarded a $3.1 million FEMA SAFER grant, and that means for the first time since the 1970s, we are adding a dozen new firefighter paramedics. We can finally almost staff our trucks each time they roll out.
Yes.
So we're hiring and training like crazy right now, but we're also pounding on our calculators to ensure we have a sound plan for 3 years from now when that funding is used up. So this increase in shared revenue gives the city the flexibility to prioritize our most urgent needs. It will also serve our entire central Wisconsin region. We're surrounded by smaller part-time and volunteer departments, but when our neighbors in the surrounding towns and villages need us, we show up. Wausau is also the regional hazmat response team, so we respond to every corner of Marathon County, but also to our neighbors in Taylor County, Clark County, and other counties that rely on our expertise in times of emergency. I was kind of hoping that the governor or majority leader would show up like Oprah with a giant novelty check with the more than $1 million increase that we'll be seeing in shared revenue. Wausau is penciled to get thanks to AB 245. And as the governor said, it's more than 29% increase over the last budget, and that's going to have a massive impact on our community. So with that, I am thrilled to introduce an inspirational legislator who works her tail off for the people of Wisconsin, State Senator LaTanya Johnson.
Hello, I'm State Senator LaTanya Johnson, and I represent Milwaukee's 6th Senate District. For so many decades now, our communities and our municipalities have been asked to do so much more with significantly less. And we have watched you guys use every innovative method necessary to just piece together every absolute resource that you had, to pull together budgets and resources to keep your communities whole. And for so many communities, that took absolutely everything that you had. Well, this shared revenue package is designed to give you the resources necessary to allow you the opportunity to give you the resources necessary to do those things for your communities that you deserve to have done. For the city of Milwaukee, we were on the verge of insolvency. And for us, that meant that we would have to lay off up to 700 police officers, 250 firefighters. We would have to basically lay off 17 engines. We would have to dissolve almost all of our entire, we would have to lay off our, we would have to lay off 10 of our 12 library resources and so many more of our vital services. And for a community of our size, over 550,000 hardworking residences, they did not deserve that. For the city of Milwaukee ranks second out of the 50 largest metropolitan cities in the United States. We rank second out of the 50 largest cities in poverty. But yet, the Milwaukee area brought in $6 billion in tourism, $2.1 billion from the city of Milwaukee alone. So we know that we are Wisconsin's economic engine. So this shared revenue package for us means absolutely everything. It is our city's opportunity to start over. It is worth $1 billion for our students, both public, charter, and choice, to have quality education. Now let me break down exactly what that means for a district like mine. So I have the privilege of representing a zip code called 53203. That is one of the most expensive zip codes in the city of Milwaukee. It is home to the Pfizer Forum, the Wisconsin Center District. It is also home to the Milwaukee Panther Arena, the Milwaukee Miller High Life Theater. But I also represent a zip code called 53206. The median resale value of a home in that zip code is just $4,300, and that was prior to COVID. Now, one district encompasses two very different zip codes. So you can imagine what life is like for two very different socioeconomic statuses. So what do the public school systems look like for those two different school districts? Because of the efforts of Governor Tony Evers and my Republican colleagues, those students will not have to be winners or losers. They will all have an opportunity for quality education. And in the city of Milwaukee, that means everything. It means giving those students an opportunity to raise themselves out of poverty and escalate themselves into an opportunity of success. I came from 53206. Our county executive came from 53206. Our mayor came from 53206. The only thing that was standing in the way of our opportunity from where we were to where we are today is education. And for those kids, that means everything. And this shared revenue bill means absolutely everything to the city of Milwaukee. Those resources, those finances, and not only that, but this collaboration between our governor and our Republican colleagues means everything. So for some individuals, this was just a bill. But for the individuals in the city of Milwaukee who are on the verge of insolvency, this means an opportunity to start over. This means an opportunity to just begin anew. And so I can't thank these individuals enough, because for so many who are depending on them to just give our city our children an opportunity to start over and to begin anew. This meant everything. So thank you. And now I would like to introduce my colleague, Representative Katrina Shanklin.
Thank you so much. What a day. This is such a momentous occasion, and I'm so excited to celebrate the shared revenue deal. For far too long, we know that communities across Wisconsin have been doing more with less. We've seen town board chairs plow the roads. Just heard a story about another town board leader in rural Wisconsin pick up a stray animal. Our government leaders are doing everything possible, and it is time that we recognize that with more resources, which is exactly why we're here today. I think we can all agree that the people of Wisconsin deserve to live in communities where their basic needs are being met. But after years of stagnant shared revenue payments from the state to our local municipalities, many core government services, including police, fire, and EMS, have been put at risk of harmful cuts. Over the last decade, we've seen a record number of communities go to referenda, where residents voted to raise their own property taxes to fund these vital services. However, property taxpayers can only absorb so much of the tax burden, and with a record surplus, thanks to Governor Evers' leadership, now was the time to restructure our broken shared revenue system. Assembly Bill 245 is a bipartisan compromise that will provide transformative funding to every community across the state. I'm excited that for the first time in years, this funding model recognizes the unique challenges that our rural communities face and helps them fulfill those needs. This funding will ease the burden on property taxpayers and ensure our first responders have the resources that they need to continue keeping our communities safe. It was abundantly clear to everyone in the legislature how important solving this funding challenge was for our communities. And that's why fixing our shared revenue program was one of the top priorities for just about everyone this legislative session. It certainly was the #1 issue I heard about on the campaign trail, as well as from constituents, community stakeholders, and local elected officials as soon as the session began. I really want to thank Governor Evers for making this the #1 issue from day one. In my district, there are more than 20 towns and villages and 1 city, all of which will receive unprecedented state funding. Just to highlight a few, the town of Albin will receive a 262% increase in funding. The town of Almond will receive a 238% boost. The town of New Hope is getting a 408% increase, and the village of Amherst Junction is getting 185% more in shared revenue. This bill helps close the funding gaps that existed for so long in our old shared revenue formula between larger communities and smaller, more rural communities. And in addition, with this bill being signed into law today, every locality wins. The city of Stevens Point is the largest municipality in my assembly district, and they're receiving an additional $865,000 in funding, while the village of Plover, which is the second largest, will get a $338,000 boost. This bill provides solid base funding for local communities, and by tying local government funding to the state sales tax moving forward, it will ensure that localities are plugged into the state economy and share in our state's economic growth from now into the future. These historic increases in funding are essential to our communities across Wisconsin, and they'll support our first responders, invest in our community resources and services, reduce the over-reliance on property taxes to fund local governments, and improve the overall quality of life for our residents. Is Assembly Bill 245 perfect? It depends on the eye of the beholder, but what I want to say is this. We all had to make compromises to get here today, and everyone should be rewarded in government for coming together and making compromises. It's what the people of Wisconsin expect us to do. I really want to thank everyone who was a part of delivering this deal and who was part of this historic compromise. I'm proud to have supported this legislation to deliver record increases in funding to our local communities, and I especially want to recognize and thank the governor for bringing everyone to the table and hammering out a solution that received broad bipartisan support in both houses of the legislature. With the passage of this shared revenue legislation, our small towns and rural communities across Wisconsin are finally getting a fair shake. I'm so excited for this day. It's what I'm most grateful for. I also want to thank the many local elected leaders, police, fire, and EMS associations, local government organizations, and stakeholder groups who played a role in the passage of this bill and who've been advocating for years and years, some of you may say decades, to get this done. When leaders work together in good faith, we can find compromises that addresses our state's most pressing challenges. That's exactly what we're here for, making life better for Wisconsin's residents. Thank you so much, and at this time, I'm happy to introduce our Secretary of Revenue, Peter Barca.
Well, thank you so much. What an extraordinary day. Look around at this group. Oh, my God. The governor and I were here at this very location at the start of the budget process, and we got on the plane going back. I thought, oh, my God, I hope this works. And here we are. It worked. It's a success. It is bipartisan. And as Representative Shanklin said, it's not that often you have these kind of incredible bipartisan deals. You know, we work with the over 1,800 communities across the state, and I'll tell you, Milwaukee wasn't the only one that was close to insolvency, although I'm not going to give you any names. But a lot of communities just were desperately hurting because it's been virtually 20 years since there's been any increase. And most importantly, with this huge increase also comes that notion of sharing in economic prosperity in the future, because as the sales tax grows, everybody will benefit, so we all can work together to try and ensure that that happens. I also want to recognize, I know my friends, Senator Falkowski and Representative Kurtz are here. They're the ones that authored the bill initially, and not only did they do that, I know they were pushing hard behind the scenes at their leaders, Senator Lemieux and Speaker Voss, and they played a very fundamental role to make sure they kept meeting with the governor and to make sure that they could reach this deal. But, you know, let's not forget the governor, when he ran for election, he made this his #1 priority. And he kept at the table, he kept coming back time and time again until we had this type of a great success that we're all here to celebrate. So congratulations really to everybody here. Thank you to the fire chief, police chief. I know you guys fought hard to try to get this victory, because after all, this is public safety. This is how we primarily fund public safety in Wisconsin. It's also how we fund the quality of life to make our communities strong in so many other ways. So with that having been said, now for the moment we're all here for, Governor, we look forward to you signing that bill. Let's give him a round of applause. Here we are. Whoa-ho.
want me to stay put? What's that? Do you want me to stay put? If he splits, I'm gonna try and chase after him.
Yeah, I will.
I think back here, if that's okay. Yeah.
We're okay?
Again.
I don't hear you.
You still have his podium audio?
All right, it's a great day for Wisconsin, a nice bipartisan win for our local folks, and let's get right to some questions from the media.
Governor, did you sign the bill today in full, or were you considering any partial vetoes of the legislation today?
I'm sorry,
Did you sign the bill in full? Were you considering any partial vetoes of the legislation today?
any parts of the veto on this piece?
Right.
I'm sorry, there's a question over here. Well, I think on both sides. I mean, obviously, the amount of money was an issue. Obviously, the folks from the city of Milwaukee had some really difficult things to answer to regarding, requirements that they have to do X, Y, and Z. And I don't know if the mayor or the county executive want to talk to that. Those, I'm sure, were exceedingly difficult decisions to make. Yes. Well, what people forget is every time we have a budget for public schools, our money for charters or for vouchers goes up too. And so there's almost nothing different this time than last time. We added a little bit more money in order to get this deal across the finish line. But the idea that somehow voucher schools and independent charters haven't been receiving money and all of a sudden they are this time, that's just not true. They receive a percentage, just like, if we go up 1% for public schools, it goes up 1% for charters. It's always been in vouchers. It's always been that way. And so I understand people's concerned about that, but I thought a small bump for those schools was a way to get to go. Yes. Well,
I'm going to spend it.
yeah. It's been signed, it's in law, and it's about getting the money out the door so people in a position. But we have to pass the budget. The budget has not been signed. It hasn't been approved by the legislature. Once that's done, I feel confident that we'll be in a good place to implement this. It was signed earlier today. No, I was long gone before then. First of all, Juneteenth in Milwaukee and Juneteenth across the state is a wonderful opportunity to, think about and celebrate where we are, and to also think about what more we have to do to make sure that Black and other people of color have the best opportunities they can have in the state of Wisconsin. That said, my own personal thought when I heard it was young kids, it's the idea that somehow settling beefs between groups of people or a handful of people with guns is just, it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's just freaking heartbreaking. And we have to do better as parents. We have to do better as adults in the community. We need to think about at some point in time the issue of guns and guns being stored safely and things like that. But the initial thing is it breaks your heart. Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good work. Good work.
More local news now with Channel 3000 Plus, our free digital streaming service that brings you area news and info 24/7 from the News 3 Now team. Channel 3000 Plus. Download it today and watch from your streaming media player or mobile device.